We begin with Fox News Alerts. The all-out effort to hold the Senate lands in Missouri. President Trump rallies support for Republican candidate Josh Hawley on a day filled with brand new developments in the president's immigration message. What he's got planned for the border, straight ahead. And Republicans are staking Tuesday on Trump power, while Democrats are pinning key races on star power. Who will win in those head-to-head matchups? Karl Rove is here live with analysis. And later, Brazil's ambassador compares the man some are calling the Trump of the tropics to the real thing. President-elect Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil is vowing to crack down on crime and corruption, and critics warn he could be very heavy-handed about it. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. We begin with correspondent Kristen Fisher on the latest tough talk on the border from the president.
With just 5 days to go until the midterms, President Trump is using his bully pulpit at the White House to threaten the thousands of migrants making their way to the U.S. border.
They want to throw rocks at our military fights back. We're going to consider it, and I told them, consider it a rifle.
Today, President Trump announced he'd be issuing an executive order next week that would fundamentally change the U.S. asylum policy.
Under this plan, the illegal aliens will no longer get a free pass into our country by lodging meritless claims in seeking asylum. Instead, migrants seeking asylum will have to present themselves lawfully at a port of entry.
And instead of catching and releasing these asylum seekers, the president says they will now be held in tents, possibly for years, as they make their way through the asylum process.
We're putting up massive cities of tents. We have thousands of tents. We have a lot of tents. We have a lot of everything. We're going to hold them right there.
Top Democrats hitting the campaign trail, like former President Barack Obama, say these are simply scare tactics intended to rally the base before the midterms.
They're trying to convince everybody to be afraid of a bunch of impoverished, malnourished refugees 1,000 miles away. That's the thing that is the most important thing in this election. Not health care, not whether or not folks are able to retire. Don't fall for that kind of fear-mongering.
No, not fear-mongering at all. Immigration is a very important subject.
It's so important that the president's re-election campaign made a Make America Safe Again ad, tying Democrats and the caravan to a twice-deported cop-killing Mexican immigrant. The chairman of the DNC called the ad the dog whistle of all dog whistles. But criticism like that hasn't stopped the president from doubling down on his claim that the caravan is comprised of some dangerous people.
This isn't an innocent group of people. There's a large number of people that are tough.
Now, President Trump insists that his forthcoming executive order on asylum would be totally legal and well within his powers. But there are many legal scholars who say that the changes that he's proposing might be unconstitutional, Shannon.
All right, we'll see. Some already challenging it, even though we don't have the order yet. We're going to talk about that
right now.
Yeah. All right, Kristen Fisher, thank you very much.
Bet.
Okay, immigration is the focus of President Trump's closing argument heading into the midterms. And tonight, the first wave of active duty troops has arrived on our southern border in Texas and Arizona as migrant caravans push towards the U.S. border. Senior correspondent Rick Leventhal is in El Paso tonight. Hi, Rick.
Shannon, at the current pace, the migrant caravan won't get to the U.S. border until sometime in December, which gives the U.S. military plenty of time to gear up for this mission. And in fact, some of the deployed soldiers have already arrived here at Fort Bliss, which is one of several military installations in Texas, Arizona, and California, serving as support and logistics hubs for the thousands of troops. And those troops are coming from bases across America, including Fort Knox and Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and other bases in Georgia, Illinois, Colorado, even Washington State. The assets being sent include helicopter battalions, cargo planes, medical companies, military police, and numerous engineering specialists, bringing materials including concertina wire and Connex containers. They'll be reinforcing points of entry with temporary vehicle barriers and fencing, building temporary housing, not for migrants, but for border agents and troops. They'll be doing aerial surveillance missions and ferrying of personnel and supplies on cargo planes and helicopters, and setting up medical units to triage, treat, and transport patients. The head of Northern Command, General O'Shaughnessy, said earlier this week border security is national security, and other officials have warned this group of migrants may be more dangerous than past groups already involved in violent confrontations with Mexican police. But critics include Jack Reed, the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, who says the decision to rush thousands of troops to the border at this time seems politically motivated and fails to address the true nature of the problem. Again, Shannon, this is a support mission, not a combat mission, but some of these troops will be armed, and they could use those weapons if their lives or the lives of others are threatened. Shannon.
All right, Rick Leventhal, thank you so much. Okay, so President Trump says he plans to sign an order next week that could lead to the large-scale detention of migrants crossing the southern border and bar anyone caught crossing illegally from claiming asylum. Now, the orders aren't even signed yet. We don't know exactly what they're going to say, but we've already gotten this first federal case. The plaintiffs appear to all be migrants currently traveling on foot from Honduras to the U.S. Let's talk about it tonight with our power panel. The former spokesperson for Hillary Clinton's campaign, Josh Schwerin, Manhattan Institute senior fellow Jason Riley, and contributor to the Washington Examiner, Kristen Soltis Anderson. Thank you all very much for being with us tonight.
Of course.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so I have not yet read through this whole thing. It's filed in federal court here in D.C. It's got more than a dozen people who are identified as Honduran immigrants, citizens who are currently traveling here on foot so they can seek asylum. Jason, you know, we knew there would be legal challenges, but does this now force this to actually go through the court system and potentially to the Supreme Court, something some folks may not have wanted, but it's been triggered now?
Well, we'll have to see what's in the order that they're responding to first. It's very hard to file a suit before the order has been issued, just on rhetoric or the threat of a suit taking place. But Shannon, we have thousands of people headed to the U.S. border to flout our asylum laws. You have activists on both sides of the border egging this on. This is not developed spontaneously or organically. We've had activists rounding up people and sending them north. You have U.S. attorneys going south to counsel people, or I would say coach them on what to say when they get to the border to apply. I think that the president has a duty to intervene here. We are a sovereign nation. Borders matter. I support legal immigration, as Fox viewers well know, sometimes to their disgruntlement. But I do believe that there is a process, a proper process for changing laws if we want more generous immigration policies. That is not what these folks are doing. They are intent on making a scene at the U.S. border, and I think the president is within his rights and actually has a duty to intervene here.
I want to play something the president said today in talking about immigration and kind of the precedent that would be set if these caravans are allowed to move across the U.S. border. Here's what he said.
If these caravans are allowed into our country, only bigger and more emboldened caravans will follow. And you see that's what's happening now.
Josh, is that fair to say? I mean, until Congress gets it together, gets a handle on cleaning up the loopholes and the other problems of the immigration system, is this just inviting more of the same if the president doesn't crack down?
No, this is all just a political maneuver for the president days before the election. There's no imminent threat. They are 800 miles away and walking here slowly, and it's a lot of women and children. This is not an imminent threat. It's ridiculous to send the military, and we have a very professional Border Patrol at the border who know how to handle this. This is a legal immigration process. That's what asylum is. They go, we have a system in place that can deal with it. Are there changes we can make to our immigration system? Absolutely. We should have secure borders. We should make sure that we're doing this the right way. But a month away is not as imminent as the election 4 days away. And that's why Trump's doing this. It's not actually about the policy.
Well, and to that point, Kristen, the ACLU says this. President Trump lied about the asylum system, his family separation policy, and his largely unfunded wall. What is clear from the timing and vague nature of today's remarks is that he's simply trying to inflame his base in the final run-up to the midterms. Kristen?
Well, I think there are certainly political calculations going on here. I mean, the immigration issue is one that has long been of great concern, especially to political conservatives. So that's not new, but sort of making immigration at the forefront when, as was mentioned, the caravan is not likely to arrive in the U.S. for quite a number of weeks, does seem like there's a tinge of politics going on here. And this is, I think, a potentially dangerous political gamble, sort of setting aside anything about immigration policy, because Republican voters were already very fired up. The president's supporters were engaged. They were excited about the economy. They were ready to turn out to vote. I think this raises the question, by putting this issue at the center, does it have the potential to activate Democratic voters, especially Latino voters? This is a group that Democrats are really relying on to build their majority in this midterm, but data points sort of tell different stories about whether they were going to be really engaged and enthused to turn out. There's a risk that this is politically going to not energize energize the president's voters any more than they already were, because they were already excited, but may in fact do more to energize the other side.
Yeah, we know that consistently the polling shows that health care and immigration are the top two issues, depending on which party you're talking about. But for most voters, those two are the top two. I want to very quickly make sure I get to all of you to get a comment on the ongoing back and forth between the president and the media. Here's something he's told Axios about going full throttle.
It's my only form of fighting back. I couldn't be here if I did that.
You won. You have the presidency.
No, but I did this before I won.
Josh, he said this is how he got to the White House. He's not going to back down now.
He's the president of the United States. He should be able to take some bad coverage. The fact is that the way that America works, it's founded on a free press. It's important. Just because he doesn't like the coverage doesn't mean it's fake. CNN had a bomb in their newsroom, 2 bombs in their newsrooms in the last week. It's dangerous, and he should be a bigger guy than this. He's the president of the United States. He's the most powerful person in the world. He should be able to brush it off a little bit.
Okay, Morning Consult has a new poll out with Politico. They say this, it shows that 64% of registered voters said the press has done more to divide the country than united since Trump took office, compared with 56% who said the same was true of the president. Jason and Kristen, I'll have you both weigh in. Jason, you first. More people think the media is to blame.
I think these are they're right. They're onto something. I don't think the press is the enemy of the people. Obviously, I'm a member of the press, as are you, Shannon. But we do know that the press has behaved extremely irresponsibly, particularly since the Trump presidency, and that's why he resorts to social media. He does not trust the media to get his message out there, to treat him fairly, and I think that's why he'll continue to use social media.
Kristen? Quick final word to you.
Criticizing President Trump is more of a partisan thing, whereas I find both Democrats and Republicans have different complaints about the media. They don't always agree on it, but there are certainly folks on both sides of the aisle that have criticisms, and I think that's why you're seeing that number be higher for saying the media is divisive versus Donald Trump.
All right, Kristen, Jason, and Josh, thank you all for being with us on tonight's Power Panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, incumbent Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill locked in a nail-biter of a race as she tries to hold on to her seat. Tonight, President Trump takes his MAGA tour to Missouri to rally for her opponent. Josh Hawley will take you there live. Plus, Karl Rove is here to talk about the latest odds on a blue wave, why Arizona Democrat Kyrsten Sinema is seeing green tonight, plus the famous whiteboards. I think he brought them. He's next. The president's jam-packed MAGA rally campaign schedule makes a stop in Missouri tonight. The incumbent Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill represents the red state, one that President Trump carried by double digits in 2016, and now he's determined to try to flip McCaskill's seat to red. Correspondent Claudia Cowan is live in Missouri tonight. Good evening, Claudia.
Good evening, Shannon. That's right. In a very important state ahead of the midterms, President Trump came here. He fired up this crowd of several thousand people for over an hour, touting the achievements he has made since he took office 2 years ago. He talked about the booming economy, the low unemployment rate, the return of manufacturing jobs, of ongoing trade talks with China. And he said, quote, now we're getting along with North Korea. He also warned those victories and more could vanish if Democrats take back Congress.
The Democrat agenda is the agenda of the extreme far left. They've gone crazy, folks. They've gone totally loco. Republicans are the party of all Americans.
Trump was here tonight to drum up votes for Republican U.S. Senate candidate Josh Hawley. Missouri's Attorney General hopes to unseat two-term Democrat Claire McCaskill in one of the most closely watched races in the country. Some say the outcome could decide who controls the Senate, and right now it's a dead heat. The latest Fox News poll showing the candidates tied at 43%, but Hawley has been gaining momentum while McCaskill is fighting for her political life in a state Trump won by 19% in 2016. McCaskill has been saying she supports Trump on some key issues, for instance, his efforts to stop the migrant caravan. And she says she opposes sanctuary laws. But the president tonight didn't buy it. He pointed out she voted to block the confirmations of Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch. And he says she does not represent the people of Missouri. With the president's approval rating at 54%, Republicans see an opportunity to flip this seat from blue to red, perhaps expand their majority in the U.S. Senate. And to underscore just how important this race is and to make sure that nothing goes awry on Tuesday, as the president put it, he was returning here to Missouri on Monday night to hold one final campaign rally just hours before the polls open on Tuesday. Shannon.
All right, Claudia Cowan with the president in Missouri. Thank you very much. Well, Democrats are calling in the political heavyweights and even some star power as they head into the home stretch. Correspondent Trace Gallagher has the story of Oprah and Obama tag teaming in Georgia. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Shannon. Oprah got a big, warm welcome in Marietta, Georgia. She fired up the crowd and she gave a rousing speech. But before she did what she came to do, Oprah Winfrey had a little something she wanted to settle. Watch.
I don't want to run, okay? I'm not trying to test any waters.
Because they're not campaign push for Georgia gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams, who is trying to become the first black woman governor in U.S. history. Oprah Winfrey praised Abrams as a leader who will serve the underserved. She also talked about the power of the polls. Watch.
And for anybody here who has an ancestor who didn't have the right to vote, and you are choosing not to vote wherever you are in this state, in this country, you are dishonoring your family.
Meantime, Georgia GOP gubernatorial candidate Brian Kemp brought in his own form of star power, Vice President Mike Pence, who reminded Stacey Abrams and her liberal friends that, quote, this ain't Hollywood, this is Georgia. And President Trump also had a message for Georgia. Listen.
Oprah's good, but the woman that she's supporting is not qualified to be the governor of Georgia by any stretch of the imagination.
Democratic or Republican to say.
Of course, former President Obama will beg to differ when he comes to Georgia tomorrow to campaign for Stacey Abrams and a list of other Southern Democrats. Then this weekend, the former president will head back to his adopted hometown of Chicago to help rally support for Illinois Democratic gubernatorial candidate J.B. Pritzker. And former Vice President Joe Biden is also back on the trail. Today, he was in North Dakota trying to give a much-needed lift to the campaign of Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp.
She has remarkable courage and a fierce independence. There's no better example of character in public life and public office than your United States Senator Heidi Heitkamp.
Yeah, the latest Fox News poll has Heitkamp running 9 points behind her Republican challenger, Kevin Cramer. Shannon.
Trace Gallagher in LA, thank you so much. All right, the House editor for the Cook Political Report updating his outlook for the balance of power after the midterms. Dave Wasserman predicts Democrats will gain 30 to 40 seats in the House. Now, you know, they only need 23 to be in the majority. Wasserman also cautions things very well could change before Tuesday. So let's bring in Fox News contributor Karl Rove to help break it down. All right, Karl, let's start there with those numbers. If the Cook report is right, then it is over for the GOP on the House side.
Yeah, this was an increase. Last week they were estimating between 25 and 30 Democrat pickup. Now it is 30 to 40. This could happen, no doubt about it, but I want to put things in a little bit of perspective. There is a power of incumbency. And over in 9 of 10 midterm elections since 1974, more than 90% of the incumbents have been reelected. In 2016, it was 97%. In 2014, it was 96% of incumbents were reelected. So for the Cook report to hit their number of 30 to 40 Democrats, you'd have to assume that all the open Republican seats that they count as likely Democrat, lean Democrat, toss-ups, all of those go to the Democrats. That gets you to 14. To get to the other 16, to get to the other, to get to 30 to 40 Democrat seats, you have to have between 8 and 13% of the 197 GOP incumbents be defeated. Now, it's 8% might be doable, but 13% is getting above there, and even the 8% is cutting the edge compared to what we've had in recent elections. So it could happen, but if it is, it'll be an unusual night.
Okay, the woman who was formerly the Speaker and would again like to be the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, is sounding very confident. Here's what she said this week.
We will win. Please don't say that. Do you want to say that on Hillary's fireworks barge that she canceled? Please don't say that.
We will win. We own the ground. We're not yielding one grain of sand.
Okay, Carl, with that in mind, if she is right, let's talk about some of the committee chairmanships that will change. Who's going to be running the show if Democrats take over the House?
Well, they have a sort of a seniority system, and so we will have a lot of near octogenarian chairmen if the Democrats take over the House, and there'll be some rambunctious ones. Jerry Nadler of New York is the likely Judiciary Committee chairman. He's already signaled that he'll be using the power of the Ways and Means Committee to get at the president's tax returns. We have Elijah Cummings of Maryland, who'll be chairman of the Oversight Committee. He's talking about issuing subpoenas. We'll have Maxine Waters, the chairman of the Financial Services Committee. So we'll have a number of Democrats out there as chairman of these committees who are going to be rather rambunctious. Let me suggest one other thing. If the Democrats do take control, I'm not certain that Nancy Pelosi is Speaker of the House.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
There are 46 Democratic congressional candidates, nominees of the Democratic Party, who have said, I'm not for her. I will not vote for her. There are 11 incumbent Democrats in the House who are returning, likely to return, who say, I'm not for her. Let's assume that the Cook report is right and they pick up 30 seats or 40 seats. That gets them, they need 23 to get to 218, so let's get them all the way to 40. That's 17 more seats. What happens? How many of those 46 Democrats who said I'm not voting for, and the 11 incumbents come back and say I'm not voting for you? Sure, she can win inside the Democratic caucus, but on the floor of the House, you have to have 218 people vote for, and there are another 30 some odd that during the campaign said I'm not saying where I'm going to be. It's too premature. I'm not committing to her. So how many Democrats are having committed to oppose her are going to make their first vote in the Congress to make Nancy Pelosi Speaker of the House? So we got a lot. This is an if and an if. If the Democrats take control, will she be the Speaker? These are both open questions, particularly the second one.
A lot more folks standing up this time around to say that they're a no, as you point out.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I have never seen this big a list of public opponents to the likely to a former speaker who wants to be speaker again, potential speaker.
All right, Carl, come back soon. Bring your whiteboards back. Good to see
you.
You.
Thank you. You bet.
All right, 3 countries courted by President Obama now being called out as the troika of tyranny under the Trump administration. Leland Vittert examines the substance behind the new tough talk today. Plus, thousands of Google employees worldwide walking out of their jobs in protest of sexual harassment and misconduct. The organizers have a list of demands. And later, is Facebook censoring pro-life political ads? The social media giant responds tonight. We will give you both sides, and you can decide. Seen as an effort to mobilize conservative Latino voters ahead of the midterms, the president's national security advisor was in Miami today to outline tough new policies against 3 Latin American countries he called a triangle of terror. And that's not all. Correspondent Leland Vittert has details.
President Obama took in a baseball game with Cuba's leader.
We've at times been disengaged, and at times we've sought to dictate our terms.
He got chummy with Venezuela's strongman.
We seek an equal partnership.
And talked of new beginnings with Nicaragua's dictator. Now the 3 countries face a new sheriff.
The troika of tyranny in this hemisphere, Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua, has finally met its match.
National Security Advisor John Bolton outlined the Trump administration pivot in Latin America, getting closer with allies like Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil, while slapping the 3 dictators with tough sanctions.
These tyrants fancy themselves strongmen and revolutionaries, icons and luminaries. In reality, they are clownish, pitiful figures more akin to Larry, Curly, and Moe. The 3 stooges of socialism are true believers.
During his last year in office, President Obama arrived in Cuba to thaw relations, only to have President Trump cut off much of the newfound diplomatic relationship. Speaking at the UN earlier today, the Cuban foreign minister's complaints underscored the squeeze of U.S. sanctions.
The definitive sign of the bilateral relationship continues to be the economic, commercial, and financial embargo, which is punishing the entire people of Cuba.
Bolton's message to Venezuela and Nicaragua: get ready for the same treatment. Well, Bolton went on to say that America would stand with the freedom fighters in these countries. Whether that is a clear threat to actively undermine the regimes is unclear. But you might remember, Shannon, it was just a couple of months ago that Bolton had to deny Venezuela's accusations that the United States was behind that assassination attempt on their president.
I remember it well. Leland, thank you. Good to see you. All right, thousands of Google employees worldwide walked out from a work situation today among a sexual misconduct controversy at the tech giant. Correspondent Jeff Paul has the story from Los Angeles.
From Asia all across Europe to North America. In each time zone, hundreds of Google employees got up from their desks at more than 20 offices and headed outside as the clock struck 11:10. Demonstrators are hoping to persuade the tech company to change how it handles claims of sexual misconduct. The walkout comes after a New York Times investigation showed that Google, for years, paid multi-million-dollar severance packages to executives who were accused of sexual misconduct.
I don't think Google has been an outlier, and I don't think that that's a good thing. I think Google should strive to be an outlier, like letting accused executives quietly walk away with buckets full of cash is standard, and it really should not be.
In one case, the creator of its Android software, Andy Rubin, was reportedly paid $90 million to leave, despite Google finding the misconduct claims credible. Rubin has denied any wrongdoing, saying the report was not true.
Accountability and equity.
Among their demands, protesting employees want an end to forced arbitration in cases of harassment and discrimination. They also want to see an end to pay inequity, and they want Google to publicly post a sexual harassment transparency report.
We have the eyes of many companies looking at us, and we've always been a vanguard company. So if we don't lead the way, nobody else will.
Google CEO Sundar Pichai apologized to employees and released a statement supporting the walkout. He says employees have raised constructive ideas that the company is hoping to put into action, and the company says it fired 48 employees over sexual harassment allegations in the past 2 years without providing them with payouts. Shannon?
Jeff Paul, thank you very much. All right, one of our most important trading partners, Brazil, has elected new leadership. We'll take a look at the figure raising eyebrows and how he got elected. The Brazilian ambassador to the U.S. joins me after the break to talk about the so-called Trump of the tropics. Brazil's new president-elect, the so-called Trump of the tropics, won over millions of voters in part because of his very tough stance on fighting the nation's crime and corruption. Correspondent Brian Yenes has more on the polarizing figure set to lead one of our most important trading partners.
Brazil, Latin America's largest country and the fourth largest democracy in the world, has been in turmoil for years, fueled by record-high crime, its worst recession in history, and corruption scandals. It's a recipe that's led to the election of its newest president, Jair Bolsonaro. The far-right former congressman won 55% of the vote this week, positioning himself as an outsider who will crack down on corruption and violence. Bolsonaro was himself a victim of Brazil's surging violence when he was stabbed during a campaign rally in September, an incident analysts say likely boosted him to a surprise victory. The 63-year-old former Army captain, who's famous for making this gun gesture with his hands, is in favor of torture, wants to empower the military to fight crime in the streets, and pledges to make it easier for Brazilians to buy guns.
We are in a war. Everybody says that. You in the media said that.
Bolsonaro is brash and controversial. His election, polarizing. During the campaign, he made openly racist and homophobic statements, comparing blacks to cattle, refugees to the scum of the earth, and saying he'd rather have a son die in an accident than be gay. He also told a congresswoman she was too ugly to rape.
You called me a rapist, and I told you that I would not rape you because you don't deserve it.
Human rights organizations are sounding the alarm, worried about Brazil's young democracy. Bolsonaro openly admires Brazil's military dictatorship, which ended in 1985, and has said he would purge the nation of his political rivals, forcing them overseas or imprisoning them. Though in the days after his victory, Bolsonaro says he wants to unite the country.
The opposition is always welcome. It even helps us. We need the support of everyone.
Bolsonaro's style and nationalist agenda has earned him the nickname the Trump of the tropics. President Trump congratulated Bolsonaro on his victory, and the two spoke about a strong commitment to work side by side.
It's called the Trump of South America.
I told him I'm honored. You know, Brazil's treated us very tough because they charge very big tariffs. Brazil has been very tough. So we'll be able to straighten that out.
Bolsonaro openly admires President Trump, and like the president, he too has vowed to drain the swamp, get tough with China and trade, and slash environmental regulations like privatizing the Amazon rainforest. Shannon?
Brian Yanis, thank you very much. The staggering levels of violence in Rio de Janeiro has led the military taking over security of the city. And now Bolsonaro is poised to give the military an even bigger role in Brazil's government. Let's talk about all this and more with Brazil's ambassador to the U.S., Sergio Amaral. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Well, let me ask you, because your president-elect is getting much the same reaction that our current president got when he was elected, that people said he's boisterous, he says controversial, unkind things, that he's got big plans, and some of them are not good for his political enemies. How is it being received in Brazil? How's it being received there?
There are some similarities, I would say, between Mr. Bolsonaro and President Trump. But I think that people understood that you have to take into account what the president-elect will do, he does, his policies, the people who are going to be in his cabinet. And since the second round of the elections, President-elect was very moderate in what he's saying, in what he has indicated he would do. He committed to comply with the Constitution and with the Brazilian laws. And we have strong and resilient institutions. People think about what he might do, but people don't realize that the institutions are strong. They have been working hard against corruption. The judiciary has taken to jail more than 50 political leaders, more than 50 business leaders. So the institutions are working and they are resilient.
Today, he was praised, and Brazil was praised by our former UN ambassador, who's now National Security Advisor, John Bolton, to President Trump. And what he said today was,
the recent elections of like-minded leaders in key countries, including Ivan Duque in Colombia and last weekend Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, are positive signs for the future of the region and demonstrate a growing regional commitment to free market principles and open, transparent, and accountable governance.
And that speech was about cracking down on what he called the troika of tyranny, and that included Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. You share a large border with Venezuela, and there are very troubling times going on there.
We are very concerned because this is a humanitarian crisis, and there are 2,000 kilometers of frontier with us. And we are concerned. We have been working with the U.S., for instance, in the context of the OAS. We are open to the extent we can to bring about a peaceful transition for a democratic regime in Venezuela.
Okay. In the meantime, this is what the Miami New Times had to say about your president-elect. He says he campaigned quite literally on spilling Brazilian blood, much like Filipino strongman Rodrigo Duterte. Bolsonaro has promised to mobilize police and paramilitary squads to shoot dissidents and criminals on sight. He has promised to purge left-wing outlaws. Is that a fair assessment of him, or, as you said, has he moderated his views?
Yes, the more recent declarations are on the contrary. Indeed, they are on the opposite direction. What he has insisted a lot is the misadvantage that the police in Brazil has vis-à-vis organized crime. Organized crime has stronger weapons than the police, and the police are indicted if there's a conflict against organized crime, and the police is indicted and may go to jail if, for instance, in the context of this conflict, a bandit is killed.
Okay, now to the issue of China, because I know that our president has said, you saw in the piece there, that you all have very high tariffs, that he wants to work on trade with you. I know that you say you're running a deficit, so you want to work on trade with us as well. But the issue of China is very big in the region because the U.S. sometimes obviously has competing interests with China. in a piece from the AP, the headline, Radical Plans and Risks in Foreign Policy of Brazil's Bolsonaro, says this: Bolsonaro will also be starting his administration amid friction with China, which has invested billions of dollars in energy, infrastructure, and oil projects in Brazil. During the campaign, he complained that the Chinese are not buying in Brazil, they are buying Brazil itself.
Yes, I think there are not many indications now concerning foreign policy. And of course, the relationship with China is one of the important issues, because China has a lot of investments in Brazil, and it has become our most important trading partner. But the difference between the China-Brazil relationships and the relationship that China has with other countries is whenever we say something, they accept. I told the Chinese, you're not going to bring labor. They don't. You're not going to buy land close to the frontier. They don't buy. This will much depend on us. And we have to decide on the kind of policy we want to have with China. And I see no reason why they will not continue complying with that.
Well, the world will watch and see how this new administration comes in. And as you said, much to still learn about their foreign policy and all of those things across the spectrum. But in the meantime, obrigado. Thank you for coming in, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you.
Nice to have you. All right, breaking news from DHS on alleged criminals in the caravans. Plus, Facebook responding tonight to claims that it censored a number of pro-life campaign ads by the Susan B. Anthony list. But the group says it's not buying the explanation. Fox News politics editor Chris Stirewalt is here to talk about the controversy and just how much you should rely on midterm polling. What does history tell us? When we return, he is also on my Livin' the Bream podcast this week. All the final details heading into the midterms. You don't want to miss it. Check it out. This is a Fox News alert. DHS releasing a fact sheet tonight on the migrant caravan heading towards the U.S. border right now. It claims at least 270 individuals out of several thousand within the caravan have criminal histories. DHS also says it continues to see people from more than 20 countries in this so-called flow, including Somalia, India, Haiti, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh. Well, tonight, Facebook is apologizing to a pro-life group for taking down one of its ads. Facebook says this ad does not violate Facebook's policies and never should have been rejected. We're sorry for the mistake, and the ad has been restored and is now running on Facebook. Now, it adds that it does not have policies that prohibit pro-life speech. But the Susan B. Anthony list running these political ads says our pro-life message is constantly under threat by Facebook. Let's talk about the controversy with Fox News politics editor of the Halftime Report, Chris Stirewalt. Welcome, sir.
Ma'am, how we doing?
We are doing good, but let me tell you, tonight what we're hearing from the SBA list is, and they're running pro-life ads as they often do in these really tight races, places like Montana and Tennessee and other big Senate races. They say now they're up to 6 of their ads in 6 different races that have been pulled by Facebook, and they're kind of, not buying the explanation that it was sort of a mistake. But it's getting a lot of attention.
Well, and that's just it. If you buy a relatively cheap online ad or ad for social media, if you can get a multiplier effect, if you have a controversy surrounding it. So you want to, groups like this, and on the left and on the right, push the envelope. They want to take it to some place where they're going to get maybe some a viral sharing going on. But also in this case, if they can say, hey, look, we were censored, we were taken advantage of by Facebook, they're doing the wrong thing, then, well, I'll put it this way. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about it, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, this would just be one of a bajillion, again, relatively low-dollar ads that are running on Facebook all the time. But because Facebook took it down, it creates a controversy, and that actually is a force multiplier for them.
Yeah, and I know this group is SBA, the Susan B. Anthony list, pro-life. They support pro-life candidates in political ads. And they say that they're wondering whether Planned Parenthood or NARAL or other groups on the other side have gotten the same treatment from Facebook. We're trying to find out. In the meantime, there are a lot of polls out there, and you took an interesting look back at how polls have done over the last few years. And you say, listen, they're not as bad as people want to argue they are, at least in a lot of these congressional races. What did you find?
No, look, the polls are predictive, but being predictive doesn't mean being right. So I looked back today at the last 3 midterm election cycles, and I looked at Senate races, 31 Senate races. Out of these 31 Senate races, there were only 4 times where the average, and the Real Clear Politics average of polls in the last 3 cycles, did not predict the winner. And 2 of those cases we can kind of discount. One was a crazy 3-way race that broke late and no one could have polled it. The other one was so close that it wasn't really a miss. The incumbent was up by a half a point. The challenger won by a point or so no big. There were only 2 real misses out of the whole 31, so you can be pretty confident that the polls are predictive. But there's also this. The polls are predictive, but that doesn't mean they're right. They will be wrong. There will be error, and it will be, as we found in the previous years, sometimes you miss a wave, sometimes you overstate a wave, but they will be wrong, and they will mostly be wrong in the same direction. So this year, because it's a Democratic year, either the Democrats are going to be understated or they're going to be overstated. And in the past, it's been by as much as 4 points. But there's going to be some direction that these polls are going to break one way or they're going to break another. Now, if anybody tells you they know which way they're going to break, they're lying, or they're crazy, or they're just kidding themselves.
They should buy lottery tickets if they really do know. All I know is I remember in 2016 the pollsters telling us that a lot of people would not talk to them. So they knew that there were going to be some unknowns. All right, Chris, we will see you up there in New York City for coverage of all of this next week.
Come on up, sister. We need you. Let's get going.
I'll be there on Saturday. Thank you, sir.
Okay, bye. All
right. Jeffrey Myers, the rabbi of the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, where 11 congregants were killed, 6 others injured last Saturday, is our midnight hero. Rabbi Myers said folks of many faiths, including Christians and Muslims and others, have called and asked to come to the synagogue. They want to help and they want to pray.
There is much good in America. Americans just don't see enough of that.
Yeah, so we want to highlight it. Rabbi, we agree. It has been a heartbreaking week for the Tree of Life family and the Squirrel Hill community, so we applaud his compassion and wisdom and all of the people of all different faiths or no faith at all who've reached out in compassion to help support the folks there in their loss. They're all our midnight heroes. Most watched, most trusted, most grateful you spent your evening with us. Good night from Washington. I'm Shannon Bream. Stick around for Tucker.